Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our fourth Don't Do Dumb webinar. My name is Jim Madel. I'm a licensed financial advisor with Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management for about 3 years now. Tonight, I am joined by Sean Hendricks, also a financial advisor with our firm, as well as being an estate planning attorney, and Jim Hendricks, a certified financial planner and owner of Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for organizing this, Jim.
So for those of you that haven't joined us before, we've been hosting these Don't Do Dumb events live near our office in West Dundee, Illinois, at a couple different venues. We've covered topics such as it's about years, not percentages, where we look at our thoughts on how much to have conservative versus aggressive in a portfolio and our reasonings behind it. We've discussed provide for your heirs and not the IRS, where we've discussed how to be tax efficient with naming beneficiaries due to some law changes as of 2020. And then we've also had another topic was it's not too late today, but it is tomorrow. And we examined the cost of procrastination when investing. Tonight's session, we're going to be discussing why we believe you shouldn't panic about your investments during an election year. There will be an area to submit questions for us, and we'll look to answer any of these questions following the presentation. Also, be sure to stay with us till the end, and we'll see who wins 2 tickets to a Chicago Cubs game at Wrigley Field following this presentation. And if you want an earlier webinar, I'm going to try the Wheel of Names again, hopefully not on my phone this time.
Is my name on the Wheel of Names there, Jim?
Pardon?
Is my name on the Wheel of Names?
You are excluded from the Wheel of Names, but that's okay. Yeah, I'm sure you can get yourself some Cubs tickets. So let's get started and hopefully put your mind at ease, at least on the investment side, for this upcoming election season. Yeah, I can't wait for all of this craziness to start hitting our TVs and our mailboxes. So looking at that last image, we know there are indeed some things, such as the onslaught of political ads, that will likely stress most of us out during the upcoming campaign season. And we really can't control that. However, where we want you to remain calm is with your investments. And any thoughts or notions you have of pinning your retirement hopes and dreams to your specific political candidate or political affiliation. So we want to try to calm those fears you may have. So the following is based on a true story. Jim Hendricks is going to share a story from our last election year, 2020. So let's go back to the campaign season of 2020. Jim?
Yeah, and not only is it based on a true story, it actually is a true story. Not even based. It's just literally almost. I can almost say it verbatim. So I'll be paraphrasing what actually happened, but what happened is actually very, very, very true. But before I get into that, what I'll say is we're already in our office when we're talking to clients. The most common question we're getting already is, what do you think is going to happen because of the election? What do you think is going to happen because of the election? What do you think is going to happen because of the election? And I don't want to spill all of our candy in the lobby here, but we just need to take a step back and think about what really is happening during an election year and how it really should and does ultimately affect the markets. But I think everybody kind of gets all in a tizzy a little bit, thinking about what will happen if their particular candidate doesn't win. So to illustrate that, I'm going to take us back to 2020. September and October, things were really getting kind of crazy. And these 2 events happened literally 5 minutes apart. Now, these types of things happen quite often, but I had 2 calls that were literally 5 minutes apart. And in our business, we work with lots and lots of people. We have about 850 households that we work with. So obviously, we have some people who affiliate with the Republican Party a little more, and we have some people who affiliate with the Democrat Party a little more. So we have clients from all walks of life and from all backgrounds and with all different sets of beliefs, and that's all good. I personally believe that's kind of what makes the world go round. But sometimes people get a little a little too excited about which candidate they feel is going to win and how it might affect their money. And when our phone would ring back in September and October of 2020, this is literally how 2 consecutive calls went. So the first call comes in, and it is a Democrat client. And they say, boy, Jim, if Trump wins this election again, there's going to be rioting in the streets. I'm moving to Canada. The markets, certainly my investments, I can't believe they survived in the first term. They're certainly not going to survive a second term. And everything's going to go down to zero. And so I want you to just completely sell me out of my investments if Trump wins. And so I spent the next several minutes trying to talk about a lot of the same things we're going to be talking about here during this presentation tonight, and was eventually able to talk this person down off the ledge. Well, no sooner did I hang up the phone than the phone rings again. And this time it's a conservative client. And they're saying, boy, Jim, if Biden wins, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. I just don't, this guy's going to ruin the whole economy. I can't imagine that the United States will even be around in 4 years if Biden wins. My investments are going to go to zero. I can't picture it. So if he wins, just get me completely out. I don't even want to be in silver or gold or cash. I might just take it all out and hide my money under the mattress if Biden wins. So I spent the next several minutes trying to talk this gentleman off the fence and telling him how it probably won't go the way he's foreseeing it will go. And certainly, as we know, Biden won the election, and our investments are actually doing reasonably well during his term here in office. And it has, and a lot of us will want to credit whoever's in the Oval Office, or whoever's occupying Pennsylvania Avenue. We'll want to give that person credit when the market's going well, or we'll want to blame that person when the market's not going so well. But the truth is, maybe they have a seat on the bus, but they are certainly not driving the bus. So we're hoping to avoid getting a lot of those calls during this election season. But again, one of our leading questions that we're already getting in the office right now is, hey, what's going to happen to my investments based on what's going to happen in the election? So, and again, we'll talk about a lot of those things and what history has taught us over the next several slides. So, Jim, back to you.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so if you are convinced that a specific political party or candidate drives the stock market, let's take a look at how the S&P 500 has performed under the various presidents since 1957. The average annual growth rate has been 9.8% under Democratic presidents and 6% under Republican presidents. However, the median compound annual growth rate has been 8.9 under Democratic presidents and 10.2 under Republican presidents. So as you can see, both sides of the political aisle could and probably would claim a victory. So let's get beyond just the president and look at all of Washington, D.C.'s effects on the market by political party. So this chart from CFRA Research looks at a blend of political parties in Washington, D.C. from 1945 to 2020 and how the S&P has performed. Again, we see a pretty good blend across the board. So if we're looking at a unified government where we have a Democratic president and Congress, so we're all Democrat in control, we have 22 years, and we've had a 9.8% change on the S&P 500 to the better. When we have Republican president and Congress, we've had 8 years of that, and we've had a 12.9% change for the better in the S&P 500. When we have a unified Congress, so we have a Democratic president and a fully Republican Congress, we've had 10 years of that with a 13% change to the positive in the S&P 500. And when we have a Republican president and a Democratic Congress, we've had 22 years of that for a 4.9% change in the S&P 500. And then when the Congress is split, so we have the House and Senate split between parties, under a Democratic president, we've had 4 years with a 13.6% change on the S&P 500. And then a Republican with a split House and Senate, we've had 10 years and a 5.2% change for the better. The numbers, yeah, go ahead, Jim.
If I might chime in just a little bit too,
yeah.
Because we get so many questions about this, occasionally we get representatives from the mutual fund companies that we work with will come and talk to us. And they know that we're getting these questions because all financial advisors are getting these same questions these days. So they know what clients want to talk to us about. So at one of our recent meetings, one of our mutual fund wholesalers came armed and prepared with some data that showed what happened during political cycles and election cycles. And to take some of these slides a little bit further, instead of just going out during the presidential term, if you took that out 6 years further, so if you went 10 years beyond any election and said, okay, if a president was elected as a Republican in 1980, what happened between 1980 and 1990? Or if a Democrat was elected in 1976, what happened between 1976 and 1986? And if you took the averages over a 10-year period following any election, then the results favored Democrats by 0.3% over the same time frame that we're talking about here. So going back to before the Great Depression. So overall, there's been very, very, very little difference between Republicans and Democrats being elected either during the election cycle, during the 4 years that they serve, or going out as far as 10 years after the election.
Right, exactly. And the numbers can be spun any way you want to favor your political party. But the bottom line is who sits in the Oval Office or who controls the House and Senate has very little effect on what happens on Wall Street. The CEOs and leadership teams of the businesses behind the ticker symbols have more to do with the ups and downs of the stock market than our politicians do. So let's take a look at why that is. Remember to focus on fundamentals, not the election time headlines. The daily political back and forth might be loud and in our ears, but it's not the main driver of the stock market. Investors should be primarily concerned with a company's ability to generate profits, its potential for future growth, and the overall health of the economy. So while political rhetoric can grab headlines, it's the underlying fundamentals of business and the economy that truly influence stock prices. Strong earnings and business growth are the two driving forces in this matter. History shows positive performances. Let's take a look at some reassuring data from a recent Bloomberg study. So the S&P 500 has actually produced positive returns in over 80% of election years dating back to 1928. And while past performance can't necessarily predict the future, this historical trend suggests that election years, while potentially bringing some emotional volatility into the market, don't necessarily lead to a market downturn. The market tends to bounce back and continue its upward trajectory over the long term, no matter who wins the election. Let's look closer at the returns of the S&P 500, specifically during election years. So this chart shows that of the 24 election years since 1928, only 4 have been down. And if we look closer at those down years, it wasn't necessarily the election itself that caused those downturns. With the dot-com bubble in 2000, the downturn lay squarely on inflated stock prices of startup tech companies with little to no underlying earnings to support those elevated prices. And in the financial crisis of 2007-2008, the root cause was excessive mortgage lending to borrowers who normally would not qualify for the loans they were receiving. So it was more by happenstance that those downturns landed in election years than being a direct result of the election itself. That being said, we've had 20 positive return years on the S&P 500 during election years. And so far, 2024 appears to be heading in that direction as well. In any election year, when you think there's a change coming to our political leadership, for better or worse, please remember, policy takes time to implement. The political process is very slow and deliberate. And just because there's a shift in power doesn't mean immediate changes will occur in our economy. Campaign promises need to be translated into legislation, which involves negotiation and compromise between the different branches of the government. This process can take months or even years to complete. The market and corporations with solid leadership are aware of this and often factor in potential policy changes well before they're even enacted. So the strong, good companies are taking this in, and they know how to navigate the waters. And lastly, long-term focus is the key. Investing should be a long-term strategy and not an emotional roller coaster. Don't get caught up in the day-to-day noise of the market, because rest assured, there will be ups and downs throughout your investing years. By staying focused on your long-term goals like retirement, maintaining a diversified portfolio, and having the right mix of aggressive and conservative investments, you can avoid making investment decisions based on fear or short-term election-related anxieties. Remember, compound interest is your friend. The longer you stay invested, the better chance your money will grow over time. So to recap, 1, by focusing on long-term investment goals, maintaining a diversified portfolio, and not getting caught up in daily headlines, you can navigate election season with a clear head and avoid making investment decisions rooted in fear. Number 2, the stock market is based on company earnings. Remember that, company earnings, not political policies. Strong company leadership is generally proactive in accounting for potential policy changes that may affect their industry, and they institute changes to their business models before those policies are ever even enacted to make sure that their shareholders are meeting the demands. And 3, remember, a well-planned investment strategy that you stick to can help you achieve your financial goals regardless of the political climate. Guys, you have anything to add at the end here?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to make a few comments. And one of the things we're always telling clients is try not to get emotionally invested with your investments. So try to keep your emotions out of it. That's one of the main things a good financial advisor can do for you, is try to help keep the emotion out of your investment decisions. And again, when we're talking about, it's all about company profits, not about whatever news event is happening that's coming out of the Oval Office or really anywhere on the globe. It's how does that news event affect profits? And usually the answer is not very much. So something we'll say all the time to clients is something to the effect of, if you're worried about a news event, then ask yourself this question. Pick any publicly traded company, pick your favorite one, and say, how does this news event ruin their profits 5 years from now? Because what investors are really looking for at the end of the day is what is going to happen with corporate profits for any particular given equity position over the long haul. And if whatever the news event is not likely to harm corporate profits over the long haul, then your news event, while it might cause a short-term day-to-day knee-jerk reaction in the market, it's not likely to cause a fundamental, meaningful, long-term reaction in the market, neither up or down. In fact, I've been doing this for about 22 years now, 23 years now. And in the time that I've been doing this, there's only one thing that I can say during my entire tenure that likely did affect, that something out of Washington did affect the markets. And that was during the Trump administration. They did lower the corporate tax rate from 35% down to 21%. So corporations far and wide paid a far lower rate of tax than they had the year before. Well, that added profits to their bottom line, and then that was a year where the stock market happened to go up. Now, we can't say for certain that that is a primary or even a major reason why the market went up that year, but you could make an argument that that is a cause for that. However, that's only a one-year event. So when you have something that adds to the bottom line, when corporations are preparing their profits and losses, they're using 1 year compared to the prior. So there would have been a 1 year period where their bottom line looked more profitable than the year before. But then in the second year after the tax cut, then they're going to be comparing their profits and losses from 2 years in which that tax cut was enacted during both years. So they're not going to see an incremental year over year bump from something like that. And again, the movement from that was very small, if anything at all. But because that tax cut did coincide with a pretty nice bump in the stock market, then you could make a pretty solid argument that that probably had something to do with it. Now, that is far from an endorsement of Trump, so don't go taking this as a statement. We're kind of politically neutral around the office, so please don't take that as a statement that, hey, this guy was just a big Trump supporter, so he said, hey, vote Trump. That's not what I'm saying at all. However, that's really the only incident that I can think of, up or down, where there was a measurable movement in the market because of anything that happened politically. There are always things that affect things. There's things that Democrats do that can help certain companies and things that Republicans can do that can help certain companies or hurt certain companies. Things like increased regulation helps some companies and hurts others. More open trade helps some companies and hurts others. So there's always a little bit of give and take. But as far as far-reaching, systematic, long-term benefit for any legislative act on long-term profits, it's usually pretty few and far between. Another thing I want to comment on is when we're going through these and talking about what's happened in the past, somebody always comes back with, well, it's different this time. We've got this going on, and we've got this going on, we've got this going on, we've got this going on. Again, I've been doing this a long time, and people have been telling me it's different this time ever since I started. And when I went through training 22 years ago, one of our trainers said, your clients are going to come up to you and they're going to tell you it's different this time. And that person had been in the business for 30 years. And he said that, over 30 years, people have always been telling me it's different this time, but it always ends up being the same in the long run. Invest in equities, take the emotion out of it, and you'll be rewarded for it over the long haul. The market's had lots of crises over the years during election cycles. I have a list of just a few of them here. The oil crisis, in no particular order, the hostage crisis, inflation, and I'm not talking about today's inflation. I'm talking about late 70s inflation.
Right.
World War II, Vietnam, Brexit, the dot-com bubble, the S&L crisis, the Great Depression, and the mortgage crisis. All of these things were things that people had to worry about during election cycles. And yeah, are there different problems this time? There certainly are, but does it look like any of them will have a meaningful long-term effect on our equities markets? No, I would say it's highly unlikely. So anyway, and also one last thing, when we're talking about election cycles, we in our office tell our clients to only have money that they might need over the next 5 years in more conservative holdings. And those more conservative holdings generally aren't invested in the markets anyway. And obviously our election cycles only go for 4 years. So if we're telling you not to invest money that you're going to need over the next 5 years into the market anyway, and whoever's voted into office might be voted out within 4 years, then what are we getting so worked up about? Because it's only the 5 year and longer term that we're really worried about when it comes to the markets anyway. So those are my final thoughts, and we're happy to take questions. It looks like we do have at least one question out there. So
yeah, and we'll get to that in 2 seconds here. So if you have any questions, I know there's one out there right now. Please be sure to enter them into the Q&A area, and we'll answer what we can. Also, there's a list on the screen right now of some upcoming Don't Do Dumb sessions. We have one on June 12th at DC Cobbs, which will be an in-person. And then on the 26th of June, the 17th of July, the 14th of August, and the 4th of September, we have webinars that will be out there. So we're going to be switching a little bit more into webinars going forward. So please, right now, if you want, go ahead and submit your questions. And let's go ahead right now. We're going to answer questions afterward, but right now let's go ahead and give away these Cubs tickets. We have 2 Cubs tickets for Friday, June 14th. It's a 1:20 start time, and I'm going to try this again. I'm going to try the wheel of names over to the screen. I think I did it this time, so we'll give it a little spin. And the winner of the tickets to the June 14th Cubs game is Bartz. Okay, Bartz, I will be contacting you via email, so be ready to hear from me. I am sure you're excited to hear from me. So I will get in touch with you and get those tickets your way. So for the time now, please submit any questions. And hope you found this session very useful.
Right. And as far as the questions go, we have more of a comment than a question. And one of our attendees mentioned that our current president has used executive orders to shut down things like pipelines. And while that's true, it has not shut down the oil industry. BP is still doing business. Domestic oil companies are still in business and are still near record profits right now today. So, and again, there will always be things that that each party can do that favors some industries over others. But when we're talking about long-term, meaningful, broad-based market effects, neither party is likely to have a very big effect on the securities markets, neither up nor down in the grand scheme of things. Well, the question now is if the other party wins the upcoming election, and those executive orders are reversed, will our investments be adjusted accordingly? The good news is we don't have to decide that out of our office here. I imagine that if the parties do change, then some of our mutual fund companies may look more into domestic drilling companies or domestic drilling opportunities as an investment possibility. Now, in a lot of ways, it's the same companies, whether we're drilling domestically or internationally or getting our oil from overseas. A lot of the same companies reap those same profits at the end of the day. So again, there probably won't be a really big effect on the oil industry in general as far as profitability goes, and certainly not the markets as a whole, no matter which way the election turns, as far as whether the current executive orders are reversed that are putting the crimp on domestic drilling. So I know people get pretty emotionally involved. We don't want to stay. We're not going to spend too much time talking about what if this party does this and this party does that, and this party does that. The answer to all those questions is going to be there is nothing that I see right now that will have a dramatic effect politically on the markets either direction. And that goes for anything that might happen with any news event that's happening right now, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, Israel, anything that's happening domestically. There is no news event that will have a profound effect on corporate profitability as far as we see out of our office. And then most of our mutual fund wholesalers are saying exactly the same thing that we're saying. So overall, we again, our advice is to just stay calm. Don't get too emotionally involved. Don't worry about the news headlines, and realize that your investments are a long-term endeavor if they're invested in the markets.
All right. Any other questions out there? All right. It does not look like there are any other questions coming through. So we'll close out this webinar. Thank you all so much for attending. We'll hopefully see any of you that are local to the area on June 12th over at DC Cobbs when we discuss the financial planning process. And then our next webinar is scheduled for June 26th. And forget doing a budget, maybe. All right.
Okay. And if you have questions about any of the things we talked about today, please feel free to give us a call. Any one of us will be happy to talk to you. We can be reached at 847-428-3997.
Absolutely. Have a good night, all. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.